I stood frozen in the grand aisle of St. Patrick's Cathedral as my stepmother's voice cut through the sacred silence like a blade. The words she had just spoken echoed off the vaulted ceiling, each syllable a hammer blow to my chest. That girl standing there, Maya Vance, is not Arthur's biological daughter. 200 pairs of eyes turned toward me, and in that moment, everything I thought I knew about my identity shattered into 1,000 pieces. My father's funeral, the day I was supposed to say goodbye to the man who raised me, had just become a public execution of my entire existence. If this story resonates with you, if you've ever felt betrayed by the people who were supposed to protect you, please hit that like button, subscribe to hear how this ends, and drop a comment below telling me what you would have done in my situation. Your support means everything as I share this journey. Let me take you back to where it all began, because understanding how I got to that moment requires knowing the whole truth. My name is Maya Vance, and until 3 weeks ago, I believed I was the daughter of Arthur Vance, one of New York's most respected business magnates. Growing up on the Upper East Side, I had wealth but not the unconditional love I craved. My father Arthur was kind but distant, pouring himself into Vance Industries, the manufacturing empire his grandfather built. He showed love through opportunities, not affection. My stepmother Isabel married my father when I was 5, 2 years after my mother died. She brought her son Ethan, and from day one, I was the outsider. Isabel's cruelty was subtle and sophisticated. She'd forget to mention family dinners, introduce Ethan as our son, but me as Arthur's daughter from his first marriage, and sabotage important moments like when she scheduled Ethan's birthday during my state science fair awards ceremony. When I turned 16, Isabel became trustee of my trust fund and controlled every expense while Ethan got a BMW and unlimited credit card. I responded by excelling, graduating summa cum laude from Wharton, and proving myself at Vance Industries, working 70-hour weeks and landing major accounts. My father was proud. But Isabel maneuvered Ethan into the CFO position despite his lack of qualifications and poisoned board members against me. 2 years ago, my father was diagnosed with stage 3 lung cancer. Isabel became his gatekeeper, controlling access to him at their Connecticut estate. 6 months before he died, my father pulled me aside and gave me a brass key. Everything I've built is for you. If anyone questions your place in this family, go to the safe in my office. Everything you need is inside. His eyes held a warning I didn't understand yet. 3 weeks ago at 4:47 a.m., Isabel called to say my father had passed. His funeral at St. Patrick's Cathedral drew over 1,000 people and news crews. I should have known something was wrong when Isabel insisted on giving a eulogy and brought her lawyers. The service was beautiful until Isabel's tone shifted. Before we say goodbye, there's something that must be addressed. Maya Vance has been living a lie. She is not Arthur's biological daughter. She held up DNA test results. Arthur's blood type is O negative. Maya's is a positive. It's biologically impossible. The cathedral erupted. I stood, rage burning through shock. How dare you? This is my father's funeral. Isabel's smile was cold. Your father? You're nothing but a fraud, probably the product of your mother's affair. You have no legitimate claim to anything. I started toward her, but David Chen and ushers held me back. Security escorted Isabel away, but the damage was done. I walked out with whatever dignity I could muster, cameras flashing, knowing I'd be trending as the fake Vance daughter by tonight. David took me to his apartment in Tribeca, away from the media frenzy. His wife Ellen made tea that I couldn't drink and offered comfort I couldn't accept. I sat on their couch, numb and shaking. She planned this, David said, his voice tight with anger. She's been planning this for months. I heard her talking to lawyers back in January, but I thought it was just about the will. Maya, I'm so sorry. Your father would be devastated. The mention of my father, the man I could no longer even call that apparently, broke something inside me. I cried then, really cried, for the first time since his death. Not the composed, dignified tears of a grieving daughter, but the ugly, gut-wrenching sobs of someone whose entire identity had been ripped away. Ellen held me while I fell apart, and David made calls, trying to control the media narrative and prepare for what he knew was coming next. The reading of the will was scheduled for Monday. Isabel had pushed for it to happen quickly, which should have been another red flag. That weekend was the longest of my life. I stayed at David's place because reporters had camped outside my apartment building. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. Friends, colleagues, even people I hadn't spoken to in years were calling, some to offer support, others clearly fishing for gossip. I turned it off and tried to process what had happened. Was it true? Was I not Arthur's biological daughter? My mother had died when I was so young, and my father had never remarried until Isabel. Could my mother have had an affair? The possibility made me feel sick. But even if it was true, even if I wasn't his biological child, he had raised me. He had loved me. That had to count for something. Monday morning arrived too quickly. David insisted on accompanying me to the law offices of Morrison, Chen and Associates on Park Avenue. The building was all glass and steel, intimidating and cold. We rode the elevator to the 47th floor in silence. My hands were shaking, so I kept them clasped tightly in my lap. The conference room was already occupied when we arrived. Isabel sat at the head of the table in a cream-colored suit, looking refreshed and confident. Her lawyer, a sharp-featured woman named Patricia Venturi, sat beside her. Ethan was there too, looking uncomfortable and avoiding my eyes. Several board members from Vance Industries filled the other chairs. The atmosphere was thick with tension and anticipation. Robert Morrison, my father's attorney for over 30 years, stood at the front of the room. He was a distinguished man in his 70s with kind eyes that had always reminded me of my father. Thank you all for coming. I know recent events have been distressing, but we're here today to carry out Arthur Vance's final wishes as stated in his last will and testament. Isabel leaned forward, her lips curved in a satisfied smile. Patricia already had papers spread in front of her, clearly prepared to contest whatever was about to be read. I felt like I was watching my execution being prepared. Robert opened the leather portfolio and began reading. The first parts were standard: bequests to various charities, generous severance packages for household staff, a vintage car collection going to a museum. Then he got to the main provisions. To my beloved son Ethan Vance, I leave 10% of my shares in Vance Industries, the Connecticut estate, and a trust fund of $5 million. I hope he finds his own path in life. Ethan's face fell. Clearly, he'd been expecting more. Isabel's hand tightened on the table, but she said nothing yet. Robert continued. To my wife Isabel Vance, I leave our Manhattan penthouse, 15% of my shares in Vance Industries, and a lifetime annuity of $200,000 per year, provided she does not contest this will or make any further claims against the estate. Isabel's composure cracked slightly. 30% total for her and Ethan? I could see the calculation in her eyes, the rage building. Then Robert looked directly at me, and there was something gentle in his expression. And to my daughter Maya Vance, I leave the controlling interest of 75% of Vance Industries shares, all remaining assets, and the position of chairman of the board, effective immediately. It is my wish that she lead the company into its next chapter, with the same integrity and vision she has always demonstrated. The room exploded. Isabel shot to her feet, her chair crashing backward. This is insane, illegal. That will was written under false pretenses. She grabbed the DNA results from Patricia and threw them across the table at Robert. She's not his daughter. The entire will is based on fraud. Patricia jumped in, her voice sharp and professional. Mr. Morrison, my client intends to challenge this will on the grounds that the deceased was deceived about the true parentage of Maya Vance. We have irrefutable evidence that there is no biological relationship. I sat frozen, watching my inheritance, my father's final gift to me, being contested before the ink was even dry on the death certificate. David's hand on my shoulder was the only thing keeping me grounded. This couldn't be happening. My father had left me his life's work, and Isabel was going to take it away by destroying my very identity. But Robert Morrison didn't look concerned. In fact, there was something almost satisfied in his expression. Mrs. Vance, I assure you that Arthur anticipated this exact scenario. He reached into his portfolio and pulled out a sealed envelope. The wax seal bore my father's signet ring impression. Arthur left specific instructions that this letter be opened only if Maya's parentage was questioned or contested in relation to the will. Isabel went pale. What letter? This is a trick. Another manipulation. Robert broke the seal with deliberate care and unfolded several pages of my father's distinctive handwriting. This letter is dated 6 months ago and was witnessed by myself and 2 other partners at this firm. Arthur Vance was of completely sound mind when he wrote it, as our medical certifications will attest. Let me read it to you. The room went silent. Even Isabel sank back into her chair, though her face was twisted with fury. Robert adjusted his glasses and began to read in my father's words, and I felt tears streaming down my face before he even finished the first sentence. To whom it may concern, and especially to my beloved daughter Maya. If you are hearing this letter, it means that someone, most likely my wife Isabel, has decided to weaponize a truth I have known for many years. Yes, Maya is not my biological daughter. I have been aware of this fact since she was 7 years old when I had a routine blood test for a health insurance policy. The genetic impossibility was obvious to me given my blood type, but I chose to keep this information private because it didn't matter then, and it doesn't matter now. My breath caught. He knew. All those years, he knew, and he never said a word. Robert continued reading. Let me be absolutely clear about something. I was rendered sterile following complications from a serious accident when I was 23 years old, long before I met Maya's mother, Catherine. Catherine and I discussed this openly before we married. We used a sperm donor to conceive Maya. Catherine chose the donor, handled all the arrangements, and we decided together to never tell Maya the truth because we wanted her to grow up without questions about her identity. I am her father in every way that matters. I chose to have her. I raised her. I loved her as my own because she is my own. The room was completely still. Isabel looked like she'd been slapped. I could barely process what I was hearing. Not my mother's affair, but a choice they made together. A plan. I wasn't the product of betrayal but of love and intention. Robert's voice grew stronger as he read the next part. I have watched Maya grow into an exceptional woman. She has the intelligence, integrity, and vision that I always hoped to pass on to my child. She earned her place in my company through her own merit, not through favoritism. She is the future of Vance Industries because she understands what I built it to represent: quality, innovation, and ethical business practices. This is why I leave her my controlling interest and why I trust her to lead. Then Robert paused, glancing at Isabel before continuing. His voice took on an edge. However, in the interest of complete honesty and justice, I must also reveal a truth I have kept hidden for far too long. Ethan Vance is not my biological son. Ethan's head snapped up, his face draining of color. Isabel made a choking sound. Robert kept reading, relentless. When Isabel and I married, I believed I was sterile and had made my peace with it. When she became pregnant 6 months into our marriage, I was shocked but overjoyed. However, as Ethan grew, certain genetic markers became impossible to ignore. I'm a scientist by training, and I understand genetics. When Ethan was 5, I had a private DNA test conducted. It confirmed my suspicions. Ethan is not my biological son. The silence in the room was deafening. I looked at Ethan, and for the first time, I felt a surge of sympathy for him. He looked shattered, betrayed, his entire world collapsing just as mine had days ago. Through my own investigation, I discovered that Isabel had an affair with Marcus Thorne, my business rival, during the early months of our marriage. She was pregnant with his child when she convinced me we had miraculously conceived despite my medical history. I have kept this knowledge secret for 18 years, maintaining the fiction of Ethan being my son to preserve our family's dignity and to protect Ethan himself, who is innocent in all of this. Isabel was shaking, her face a mask of rage and humiliation. Patricia was whispering urgently to her, but Isabel wasn't listening. Her carefully constructed world was crumbling, and everyone in this room was watching it happen. Robert reached the final paragraph. I forgave Isabel's betrayal for the sake of family unity, but I could never forget it, and I could never allow her deception to dictate the future of my company. Maya, you are my daughter. You are my legacy. You are my choice. Do not let anyone make you feel otherwise. And to Isabel, you have lived off my name and my money for 20 years based on your own lie. I gave you a comfortable life and security. Do not be greedy. Do not hurt Maya. If you try to contest this will or damage her reputation, know that I have left extensive documentation of your affair and financial improprieties with Robert Morrison to be released to the press and the authorities. Accept what I have given you and go in peace, or lose everything. The letter ended there. Robert folded it carefully and set it on the table. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity. Then Isabel erupted. You bastard! That lying bastard! How dare he? How dare he humiliate me like this? She lunged across the table, trying to grab the letter, but Patricia and David both intercepted her. Ethan was staring at his mother with an expression I'd never seen before. Mom, is it true? Is Marcus Thorne my father? His voice cracked, and he looked so young and lost in that moment. Isabel's face twisted. Don't be ridiculous. Your father is lying. He's trying to punish me from beyond the grave because he was a controlling, manipulative man who couldn't stand to lose. But the lie was obvious to everyone in the room. Robert spoke calmly. Mrs. Vance, I should inform you that Arthur did indeed leave the documentation he mentioned. DNA test results? Private investigator reports, financial records showing payments to Marcus Thorne's companies that were never disclosed to the board, email correspondence. If you choose to contest this will, all of it becomes public record. I would strongly advise you to accept the very generous provisions Arthur made for you and walk away. Patricia leaned in, whispering urgently to Isabel. I could see the calculation happening, the weighing of options. Fight and have her affair and financial manipulations exposed, or accept her 15%, an annuity, and maintain some dignity. Isabel stood abruptly, yanking her arm away from Patricia. She looked at me with pure hatred. This isn't over. You think you've won? You have no idea what I'm capable of. That company should be mine. I earned it by putting up with that cold, distant man for 20 years. You're nothing but a lab-created accident. She swept out of the room, Patricia hurrying after her. Ethan remained seated, his head in his hands. The board members were murmuring among themselves, shocked by the revelations. I felt like I'd been through a hurricane, emotionally battered but somehow still standing. David squeezed my shoulder. Maya, I know this is overwhelming, but we need to talk about next steps. The company needs leadership, and there's going to be media fallout from this. I nodded, trying to pull myself together. But my eyes were on Ethan. Despite everything, despite years of being treated as the lesser sibling, I couldn't ignore his pain. I walked over to him. Ethan. He looked up, his eyes red. I'm so sorry, Maya. For everything. The way we treated you. The way she treated you. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. I believed him. Ethan had been Isabel's golden child, but he was also her pawn. None of this is your fault. We're both victims of her manipulations. He shook his head. But I benefited from it. I got everything while you got scraps, and I just accepted it like I deserved it. I was an ass to you growing up. I couldn't argue with that, but I also understood what it was like to desperately want a parent's approval. We were kids. She pitted us against each other on purpose. That's what narcissists do. The next few days were a whirlwind. The contents of my father's letter leaked to the press, probably through one of the board members who couldn't resist selling the story. The New York Times, Wall Street Journal, and every major news outlet ran stories about the Vance dynasty scandal. Reporters camped outside my apartment again, shouting questions about DNA, adultery, and corporate succession. I had to step up as chairman of Vance Industries while simultaneously dealing with the most public family drama imaginable. David helped me navigate the board meetings, introducing me to key players and teaching me the political dynamics I'd never been privy to as a junior executive. I discovered that several board members were in Isabel's pocket, fed up with my father's strict ethical standards and hoping for a more flexible leadership under Ethan. The company was in trouble even before this scandal. Revenue had been declining for 3 quarters, we'd lost 2 major clients to competitors, and employee morale was low. Now, with the leadership in question and the Vance name being dragged through tabloid headlines, our stock price was plummeting. I was 27 years old, had been chairman for less than a week, and was watching my father's legacy circling the drain. Then things got worse. 2 weeks after the will reading, I arrived at work to find protesters outside the Vance Industries building in Midtown. Not just a few people, dozens, holding signs that said "Fake Heiress" and "DNA doesn't lie" and "Vance fraud." The media was having a field day, cameras rolling as I tried to walk through the crowd with dignity. Inside, my assistant Marcus, no relation to Marcus Thorne, thankfully, looked panicked. Miss Vance, you have about 20 urgent messages. 3 board members have called emergency meetings, and your stepmother's lawyer has been trying to reach you. I spent the morning putting out fires. The board meeting was hostile. Gerald Penske, a member who'd been with the company since my grandfather's time, stood up and declared that the company needed stable, proven leadership, not someone whose legitimacy was questionable. 2 others agreed. They wanted to call a vote of no confidence. David stood up, his voice sharp. Arthur Vance chose Maya to lead this company. His will is legal, binding, and based on complete transparency about Maya's parentage. Any attempt to undermine her position is a direct violation of Arthur's wishes and could expose board members to legal liability. The meeting dissolved into arguments. I sat at the head of the table, in my father's chair, feeling completely out of my depth. This was what Isabel wanted: chaos and uncertainty, my authority undermined before I could even establish it. After the meeting, I retreated to my father's office, now technically my office, though I hadn't moved any of his things yet. It still smelled like his cologne and old books. I sank into his leather chair and let myself have 5 minutes of self-pity. Then I remembered something. the key he'd given me 6 months ago. I'd almost forgotten about it in the chaos of his death and the will reading. I dug through my bag until I found it, a small brass key on a simple chain. My father had said there was a safe in his office, that everything I needed was inside. I'd assumed he meant the will or legal documents, but Robert had handled all of that. I started searching. The office was large, with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a massive mahogany desk, and several filing cabinets. It took me 20 minutes of methodically checking every possible hiding spot before I found it. Behind a loose panel in the bookshelf, there was a small wall safe. My hands trembled as I inserted the key. Inside was a leather journal, the kind my father used to carry everywhere when I was young. I opened it carefully. The pages were filled with his neat handwriting, dated entries going back 5 years. I started reading, and with each page, my understanding of the past 20 years shifted. My father had documented everything, every conversation with Isabel where she subtly undermined me, every instance where she redirected company resources to Ethan's projects over mine. Financial records showing how she'd skimmed money from family accounts, always just under the threshold that would trigger automatic audits. Phone records of calls between her and Marcus Thorne going back years. But the most damning evidence was near the end. 6 months ago, around the time my father gave me the key, he'd hired a private investigator. The report was paper-clipped inside the journal. Isabel had been feeding confidential company information to Marcus Thorne for at least 3 years. Product designs, client lists, pricing strategies, everything Thorne needed to undercut us in the market. She'd been committing corporate espionage, betraying my father and the company, all while playing the devoted wife. There was more. Bank statements showing payments from shell corporations linked to Thorne to accounts in Isabel's name. Email printouts where she discussed the endgame of getting control of Vance Industries. She and Marcus had been planning to oust my father even before his cancer diagnosis. When he got sick, they just had to wait him out. I sat there with this evidence spread across the desk, my mind reeling. My father had known all of this. He'd gathered proof, documented everything, and kept it secret. Why? Why not confront her? Why not turn her in? Then I found his final entry, dated just 2 weeks before he died. I'm running out of time. The cancer is winning, and I know it. Isabel thinks she's so clever, but I've known about her schemes for years. I let her think she was getting away with it because I needed her to get confident, to make mistakes, to leave a trail I could give to Maya. My daughter needs to understand the kind of person she's dealing with. She needs to be prepared for the war that's coming after I'm gone. I couldn't fight this battle for her, but I can give her the weapons she needs to fight it herself. Maya has always been too kind, too willing to see the best in people, even Isabel. That kindness is a strength, but it's also a vulnerability. Isabel will exploit it if given the chance. By the time Maya reads this, I'll be gone, and Isabel will have made her move. She'll attack Maya's legitimacy, try to take the company, maybe even team up with Marcus openly now that I'm not around to stop them. But Maya is smart and strong. She's everything I could have hoped for in a daughter, and she's going to win this fight. She just needs to know the truth first. Everything she needs is in this journal. Use it well, Maya. Make me proud. You already have. I couldn't stop the tears this time. My father had seen all of this coming. He'd prepared for it, like he prepared for everything, and now he was giving me the chance to finish what he started. I carefully packed the journal and all the evidence back into the safe, but I took photos of every page with my phone. Then I called the one person who could help me navigate what came next. Alex Ramirez was a former federal prosecutor who'd gone into private practice specializing in corporate fraud. I'd met him 2 years ago at a charity auction where we'd ended up bidding against each other for a weekend in the Hamptons. We'd become friends after that, grabbing coffee occasionally to talk about law and business. He was brilliant, ethical, and exactly the kind of ally I needed. Maya, I heard about everything. How are you holding up? His voice was warm with concern when he answered my call. I need your help. Can you come to my office? I have something you need to see, and it's not something I can discuss over the phone. He arrived within an hour. I spread the journal entries and evidence across the conference table in my office, and he spent 2 hours going through everything, making notes and asking questions. When he finished, he looked up at me with a mixture of admiration and concern. Your father built an airtight case. This is corporate espionage, fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, and probably 6 other charges. With this evidence, you could have Isabel arrested and sue Marcus Thorne into oblivion. I nodded. That's what I want to do. But I need to be strategic about it. Isabel still has allies on the board, and she's been poisoning my reputation publicly. If I go after her now, it looks like revenge. I need to time this right. Alex leaned back in his chair, studying me. You've changed. 2 weeks ago, you would have wanted to handle this quietly, avoid more scandal. He was right. 2 weeks ago, I was still that girl desperate for approval, trying to keep the peace. But my father's funeral had burned that version of me to ashes. She destroyed my father's funeral. She tried to take away everything he left me. She's been sabotaging this company for years. I'm done being nice. Good, Alex said, because nice doesn't win wars, strategic does. Here's what I think we should do. Over the next 2 weeks, we built our strategy. Alex brought in a forensic accountant to trace all the financial irregularities. We hired a cybersecurity firm to document the data breaches and information leaks. I quietly met with every board member individually, feeling out where their loyalties lay and sharing carefully selected pieces of information about Isabel's activities. David helped me identify which executives could be trusted and which had been compromised by Isabel's influence. Meanwhile, Isabel was launching her own campaign. She gave an interview to a major business magazine, portraying herself as the grieving widow trying to protect her husband's legacy from an opportunistic fraud. She hinted at legal action, suggested I had manipulated my father in his final days, and positioned Ethan as the true heir who'd been wrongfully disinherited. The problem was, Ethan wasn't playing along. He called me one evening, his voice hesitant. Can we meet, somewhere private? We met at a small cafe in Brooklyn, far from anywhere we might be recognized. Ethan looked terrible, like he hadn't slept in days. I confronted my mother, about Marcus Thorne, about everything. She didn't deny it. She said she did what she had to do to secure our future, that Arthur was never going to give us what we deserved. I waited, letting him process. This had to come from him. She's planning something big, Maya. She's been meeting with Marcus almost daily. They're coordinating something, going to make a play for the company. There's going to be an emergency board meeting. Marcus has been buying up shares, and with Mom's 15%, they think they can force a vote of no confidence and install new leadership. My stomach tightened. This was exactly what Alex and I had predicted, but hearing it confirmed was still shocking. When? Next week. They're calling it a special session to address the company's declining performance and leadership concerns. Ethan pulled out his phone and showed me a message thread. It was him and Isabel, and in it, she laid out the entire plan in stunning detail, assuming Ethan was still her loyal son. Why are you telling me this? Why are you helping me? I had to ask. Ethan's laugh was bitter. Because I spent my whole life thinking I was someone I'm not, thinking I deserved things I didn't earn. Arthur wasn't my father, but he treated me like a son anyway. He paid for my education, gave me a job I wasn't qualified for, left me a generous inheritance. And how did my mother repay him? By betraying him at every turn. I don't want to be like her, Maya. I can't be like her. I reached across the table and squeezed his hand. Thank you. This information, it might be exactly what we need. There's more. He tapped his phone. I've been recording her conversations with Marcus. Not all of them, but enough. I can get you proof of what they're planning. For the first time since my father's funeral, I felt a surge of hope. We weren't just reacting anymore. We were building a counteroffensive. Ethan, if you do this, she'll never forgive you. You understand that? I know, he said quietly. But maybe it's time I stood up for something real instead of just standing by her. The next week was a blur of preparation. Alex worked with the forensic accountant and the cybersecurity team to compile a comprehensive report of Isabel's activities. Ethan passed me recordings of 3 conversations between Isabel and Marcus, where they discussed their plan to take over Vance Industries, merge it with Thorne Corp, and essentially strip it for parts. David helped me prepare a presentation for the board, laying out not just the evidence of malfeasance, but also a comprehensive business plan to turn the company around. I barely slept, running on coffee and righteous anger. My father had prepared me for this moment, whether he knew it or not. Every lesson he'd taught me about business, every conversation about ethics and integrity, every time he'd encouraged me to stand up for what I believed in, it had all been leading to this. The day of the emergency board meeting arrived. It was scheduled for 2 p.m. in the main conference room at Vance Industries headquarters. I arrived early with Alex and David. We set up our presentation, tested the equipment, and went over the plan one more time. I was wearing my father's watch, a vintage Rolex he'd given me when I graduated from business school. It felt like armor. Marcus Thorne arrived with his own team of lawyers and advisors. He was a tall man in his 60s with silver hair and an arrogant smile. He barely glanced at me as he took a seat at the opposite end of the table. Isabel swept in moments later, dressed for battle in a blood-red suit. She didn't even acknowledge my presence. The board members filed in, 12 people who would decide the fate of my father's company and my future. Some looked sympathetic, others hostile, most just tired of the drama. Gerald Penske called the meeting to order at exactly 2 p.m. "We're here today because Vance Industries is in crisis," he began. "Our stock price has dropped 30% in the last month. We've lost 3 major clients. Employee turnover is at an all-time high, and our leadership, frankly, is questionable." He looked directly at me. "Miss Vance, while I respect Arthur's wishes, the fact remains that you're young, relatively inexperienced at this level, and your very legitimacy has been publicly questioned. These are not the conditions under which a company can thrive." Isabel stood up smoothly. "I'd like to propose an alternative leadership structure. Marcus Thorne has decades of experience in this industry. He's built Thorne Corp into one of our biggest competitors. I move that we offer him the position of CEO and restructure the company under joint Vance-Thorne leadership." Several board members nodded. Marcus stood, clearly ready with a prepared speech about synergy and market position. This was their moment, and they thought they had already won. I stood up. "Before we vote on anything, I'd like to present some information to the board. I think you'll find it relevant to your decision." Gerald waved dismissively. "Miss Vance, we've heard enough about your father's intentions. This is about the future of the company." "I agree completely," I said, my voice calm and clear. "This is about the future, which is why the board should know exactly who they'd be partnering with if they accept Mr. Thorne's leadership." I nodded to Alex, who hit a button on his laptop. The large screen at the front of the room lit up. The first image was a financial ledger showing money transfers from Thorne Corp shell companies to accounts in Isabel's name. Total transferred, over $2 million in the last 3 years. The room went silent. Isabel's confident smile faltered. "What is this? This is fabricated." "These are bank records, verified by forensic accountants," Alex said smoothly. "All documented, all traceable. Mrs. Vance has been receiving payments from Marcus Thorne for years." The next slide showed email excerpts. Isabel to Marcus. "Arthur is traveling to Singapore next week. I've attached his itinerary and the client list he'll be meeting with. I trust you'll make good use of this information." Marcus to Isabel. "Excellent work. The Henderson deal fell apart just as we planned. Arthur is hemorrhaging clients and he has no idea why. Another payment has been transferred to your account." More slides followed. Product designs leaked to Thorne Corp weeks before Vance Industries' product launches. Confidential pricing strategies that allowed Thorne to undercut us on every major bid. Client lists that Marcus's sales team used to poach our biggest accounts. 3 years of systematic corporate espionage, all documented in excruciating detail. Gerald was staring at Isabel in horror. Other board members were whispering urgently to each other. Marcus had gone pale, his lawyers huddling around him. "This is all fabricated. Where did you get this information? It's not admissible." Isabel's voice was shrill now, her composure cracking. "It came from my father's private files," I said. "He knew about your arrangement with Marcus for years. He documented everything, built a complete record, and left it for me with instructions to use it if necessary. He was planning to turn you into the authorities himself, but the cancer took him first." I advanced to the next slide. It was a recording timestamp. "This is from 10 days ago. A conversation between Isabel Vance and Marcus Thorne at the Plaza Hotel." I nodded to Alex again. Isabel's voice filled the room through the speakers, crystal clear. "Once we have control of the board, we can merge the companies. Arthur's precious legacy will be dismantled piece by piece. The Manhattan properties alone are worth a fortune. We liquidate, we profit, and that little bitch gets nothing." Marcus's voice responded. "What about Ethan? He's not going to like seeing his father's company destroyed." Isabel laughed, cold and cruel. "Ethan does what I tell him. He always has. He's weak, just like his father. Real father, I mean. You and I, Marcus, we're the strong ones. We deserve this." I stopped the recording. The silence in the room was absolute. Every board member was staring at Isabel and Marcus with a mixture of shock and revulsion. Even Gerald, who'd been pushing for my removal minutes ago, looked disgusted. "You've been systematically destroying this company from the inside," I said, my voice hard. "You've stolen confidential information, betrayed shareholders, and conspired to commit fraud on a massive scale. You thought my father was weak because he valued integrity. You thought I would be easy to push aside because I'm young. You were wrong on both counts." Isabel found her voice, though it shook with rage. You can't prove any of this was us. Those recordings could be fake. This is all circumstantial. Actually, Alex interjected, we have full transcripts, corroborating financial evidence, testimony from employees who were approached by Mr. Baggister, Thorne's representatives, and surveillance footage of meetings between you and Mr. Thorne. We've also been working with the SEC and the FBI. They're very interested in corporate espionage cases, especially ones involving this much money. Right on cue, the conference room doors opened. 2 FBI agents and an SEC investigator walked in. Marcus Thorne and Isabel Vance, you're under investigation for corporate espionage, securities fraud, and conspiracy to commit fraud. We need you to come with us for questioning. The room erupted. Marcus's lawyers immediately started objecting, throwing around terms like harassment and lack of probable cause. Isabel was screaming about setup and lies. But the agents were calm and professional, presenting warrants and explaining rights. I watched them being escorted out, Isabel shooting me a look of pure hatred as she passed. You're going to regret this, she hissed. You're nothing. You'll always be nothing. I looked her straight in the eye. No, Isabel. You spent 20 years trying to make me believe that. But I know the truth now. I'm my father's daughter, the one he chose, the one he trusted with everything he built, and you're just a criminal being taken away in handcuffs. We're not the same. After they were gone, the conference room remained silent for a long moment. Then David stood up. I think we can all agree that the proposed leadership change is off the table. Maya, you have the floor. I took a deep breath and advanced to the next part of my presentation. Here's my plan to save this company. For the next hour, I laid out a comprehensive strategy. We'd restructure our product lines, focusing on sustainable manufacturing, which was the growing market of the future. We'd rebuild our reputation through transparent business practices and ethical sourcing. We'd invest in our employees with better benefits and profit-sharing programs. And we'd take the fight directly to our competitors who'd been benefiting from stolen information, reclaiming our market position through innovation rather than secrets. The board members listened, asking questions, raising concerns, but I had answers for everything, backed by research and realistic projections. David and Alex supported me, adding their expertise. By the end, even Gerald was nodding thoughtfully. Miss Vance, I owe you an apology. Gerald said, I underestimated you. Arthur clearly didn't. He trained you for this, didn't he? Every day of my life, I said. Sometimes I didn't even realize he was doing it. But yes, he prepared me for exactly this moment. The board voted unanimously to maintain current leadership and to implement my restructuring plan. They also voted to fully cooperate with the federal investigation and to pursue civil suits against both Isabel and Marcus for damages to the company. The following weeks were a media frenzy again, but this time the narrative was different. The story wasn't about a fake heiress, it was about corporate espionage, betrayal, and justice. The Wall Street Journal ran a front-page story. Vance heiress exposes years-long corporate fraud. Business Insider called me the CEO who fought back. Even the critics who'd questioned my legitimacy had to admit I'd handled the crisis with intelligence and integrity. Isabel and Marcus were indicted on multiple charges. The evidence was overwhelming, and their lawyers were already talking plea deals. Thorne Corp's stock crashed when the extent of Marcus's illegal activities came to light. Several of his board members resigned. The company would likely have to declare bankruptcy. Isabel's social circle, the wealthy Manhattan elite who'd once fawned over her, disappeared overnight. She was toxic now, a criminal, someone who'd betrayed the sacred trust of New York's business community. The penthouse my father had left her was seized as proceeds of crime. The annuity was frozen. She'd be lucky to avoid prison time. As for Ethan, he became my unlikely ally. He spent a year working his way up from an entry-level position I'd given him in our West Coast office, away from the New York drama. He wanted to prove he could earn his place on merit, not nepotism. He called me every few weeks with updates, and slowly, we were building something that resembled a real sibling relationship. 6 months after that fateful board meeting, Vance Industries released its quarterly earnings. We'd exceeded projections by 15%. Our sustainable product line was a massive hit, and we'd signed contracts with 3 Fortune 500 companies who wanted to partner with us on green manufacturing initiatives. Our stock price had recovered and was now higher than it had been in 5 years. I was standing in my office late one Friday evening, looking out at the Manhattan skyline, when David knocked and came in. Working late again? You know, even workaholics are supposed to take weekends off. I smiled. Just finishing up some reports. How are Elizabeth and the kids? Good. She wanted me to invite you to dinner tomorrow night. She says you've lost weight and needs someone to force-feed you her lasagna. Tell her I'd love to. I turned back to the window. David, can I ask you something? Always. Did my father really think I could do this? Or was he just hoping for the best? David came to stand beside me, looking out at the city lights. Arthur knew exactly what you were capable of. He saw it in you when you were just a kid. The way you solved problems, the way you cared about fairness, the way you never gave up even when things were hard. He told me once that you were the best decision he ever made, choosing to be your father. Tears stung my eyes. I miss him, every day. I know, but look at what you've built, Maya. Look at what you've protected and grown. He would be so proud. Hell, I'm proud and I'm just your cranky surrogate uncle. I laughed through the tears. You're not cranky, most of the time. My phone buzzed, a text from Alex. Dinner tomorrow? I found this amazing new Italian place in Brooklyn. Over the past 6 months, Alex and I had gotten closer. The professional relationship had evolved into something more personal. We were taking it slow, both of us aware that I was still healing from years of emotional abuse and a very public betrayal. But it was nice, having someone who understood the business world but also made me laugh, who could talk legal strategy one minute and debate the best pizza toppings the next. I texted back, sounds perfect. 7 p.m.? It's a date. Literally. A year after my father's death, I stood in front of a crowd of 500 people at the Manhattan Convention Center. We were launching the Arthur Vance Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to supporting young entrepreneurs who came from difficult backgrounds. The foundation would provide grants, mentorship, and resources to help talented people who'd never had the opportunities I was given. My father believed that talent and character were more important than bloodlines, I told the audience. He proved that every day of his life by choosing to be a father to a child who wasn't biologically his, by building a company based on ethics rather than shortcuts, and by leaving a legacy that was about more than just money. The Arthur Vance Foundation will continue that legacy by investing in people, not pedigrees. The room erupted in applause. I saw Ethan in the audience clapping enthusiastically. He'd contributed a substantial portion of his trust fund to the foundation. David and Ellen were there, beaming with pride. Alex gave me a thumbs up from his seat in the second row. After the ceremony, as people mingled and networked, I slipped away for a moment. I found a quiet corner and pulled out my phone. I had a photo of my father saved there, one of the last pictures taken before he got too sick. He was in his study, surrounded by books, smiling at the camera with tired but loving eyes. I did it, Dad, I whispered. I protected what you built. I'm building something new, too, something that would make you proud. I hope wherever you are, you can see this. I hope you know that your choice to be my father was the greatest gift anyone ever gave me. I felt a hand on my shoulder. Alex stood there, understanding in his eyes. He didn't say anything, just stood with me for a moment, letting me have my private goodbye and thank you to the man who'd shaped me into who I was. 2 years later, Vance Industries was thriving. We'd expanded into renewable energy, partnered with universities on sustainable technology research, and became a leader in ethical manufacturing. I'd been named to Forbes' 30 Under 30 list and given a keynote address at a major business conference about integrity and leadership. Isabel had pled guilty to reduced charges and served 18 months in minimum security prison. When she was released, she moved to Florida, broke and largely forgotten. I heard through mutual acquaintances that she tried to reach out to Ethan, but he declined to respond. Some wounds were too deep to heal, some betrayals too fundamental to forgive. Marcus Thorne's company had indeed gone bankrupt. He faced more serious charges and ended up serving 5 years in federal prison. His fall from grace was spectacular and complete. As for me, I was learning to build a life that wasn't defined by other people's expectations or judgments. Alex and I had been together for over a year, and he was my partner in every sense of the word, supporting my career, challenging me to be better, making me laugh when things got too serious. David remained my mentor and father figure, the man who stepped in when I needed guidance. Ethan had proven himself over those 2 years. He worked his way up to VP of West Coast Operations and was genuinely good at his job. We talked at least once a week, sometimes about business, often about everything else. We'd both been shaped by Isabel's manipulations, but we refused to let that define us. We chose to be better. The Arthur Vance Foundation had awarded over 50 grants to young entrepreneurs, and several of them had launched successful businesses. We were changing lives, creating opportunities, and honoring my father's belief that everyone deserved a chance to prove themselves. On what would have been my father's 65th birthday, I visited his grave for the first time since the funeral. It was a cold November day, leaves crunching under my feet as I walked through the cemetery. His headstone was simple, elegant, exactly what he would have wanted. Arthur Vance, beloved father, visionary leader, man of integrity, 1960 to 2023. I laid flowers at the base and sat down on the cold ground, not caring about my expensive coat. "Hi, Dad. I'm sorry it took me so long to come here. I wasn't ready before." Every time I thought about visiting, I remembered that horrible funeral, Isabel destroying your goodbye, turning your death into another one of her power plays. I brushed fallen leaves off the stone. But I'm here now, and I have so much to tell you. The company is doing amazing. We just posted our best quarter ever. The foundation is changing lives. Ethan is actually a really decent person when he's not under Isabel's influence, and I'm happy, Dad. For the first time in my life, I'm genuinely, deeply happy. Not because I'm trying to earn anyone's approval or prove something, but because I'm living authentically. A breeze rustled through the trees, and I smiled. You knew, didn't you? You knew that everything had to fall apart so I could build it back stronger. You knew that I needed to face the absolute worst, to be publicly humiliated and betrayed, so I would finally stop seeking validation from people who would never give it. You gave me the tools to fight back, but more importantly, you gave me the strength to believe I deserved to fight back. I stood up, brushing dirt from my coat. I'm going to keep building, Dad. I'm going to keep honoring your legacy by being the kind of leader you taught me to be, ethical, compassionate, but strong. I'm going to keep choosing to be a Vance, not because of DNA, but because of the values you instilled in me. Thank you for choosing me. Thank you for seeing something in me worth nurturing. Thank you for being my father in every way that mattered. As I walked back to my car, I felt lighter than I had in years. The weight of other people's judgments, the burden of trying to fit into a family that never wanted me, the exhaustion of constantly proving my worth, all of it was gone. I was free to just be Maya Vance, CEO, philanthropist, daughter of Arthur Vance by choice, and that was more than enough. Real family isn't about blood. It's about choice, loyalty, and love. My father chose me, and every day I choose to honor that choice by living a life that reflects his values. Isabel tried to destroy me by exposing that we weren't biologically related, but she actually freed me. She proved that the bond between my father and me was stronger than genetics, built on respect and genuine affection rather than obligation. So here's what I learned from this whole nightmare. You don't owe loyalty to people who treat you poorly just because they're family. You have the right to set boundaries, to demand respect, to walk away from toxic relationships. And sometimes, the family you choose, the people who support you and believe in you and stand by you through the worst moments, those people are more real than any bloodline. It took me 27 years and a very public betrayal to understand that my worth wasn't determined by whether Arthur Vance was my biological father. It was determined by the person I chose to be, the values I upheld, and the legacy I would leave behind. And that legacy would be mine, built on the foundation my father gave me, but uniquely and authentically my own. I share this story because maybe some of you are going through something similar. Maybe you're in a relationship, family or otherwise, where you're constantly made to feel less than, where your contributions are minimized, where you're taken for granted or actively undermined. If that's you, I want you to know, you deserve better. You deserve to be valued. And sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is walk away from people who make you feel small and build a life that makes you feel whole. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to cut ties with toxic family members? How did you find the strength to put yourself first? Drop your stories in the comments below. And if this resonated with you, if you see yourself in this struggle, please hit that like button and subscribe. Your support means everything, and together we can remind each other that we're worthy of respect, love, and the chance to build our own legacies. Thank you for listening to my story.